This is 22 Hours, A Second Look, the re-release of our award-winning podcast 10 years after the killing of Philip Savopoulos, his parents, Amy and Sava, and Vera Figueroa. You'll find new content at the end of this episode about what became of the Savopoulos' mansion after it partially burned down. I speak to the man who spent millions to build something new for his family, knowing what happened there. And we tour the $6 million home he's now selling without ever moving in. How it's now listed under a different address. That's coming up after the episode. Previously on 22 Hours, An American Nightmare.
From which floor is the fire coming from?
It's coming from, it looks like it initially from a bedroom, but it's going sweeping across the whole overhang on the front of the house.
This is private house, single house?
It's a private mansion.
A suspicious fire has led to a D.C. police investigation into the deaths of 4 people found in a sprawling home, not far from the vice president's residence.
It's just hard to imagine that such a nice family could be the victim of something so depraved. It does make you really think about how bad people can be.
It is being called a major crime scene as homicide investigators examine a house that caught fire in northwest D.C.
The room is a crime scene.
They found 4 people, including a child, dead inside on the second floor.
Right now, it does not appear that this was just a random crime.
I said, but what happened? They said, we don't know. They killed the whole family.
Police have said they believe more than one person is responsible for the crime.
A wide-reaching manhunt for Darren Wint, stretching all the way to New York City.
We had the DNA on a piece across. How did his DNA get into that house?
Got a package that I'm going to need you to bring down to me.
To do what he did to 4 people, including a 10-year-old boy, is just beyond words.
They were brutalized, and we saw the evidence of that.
The jury has just reached a verdict in the murder trial of Darren Wint.
He was going to strike the American dream just by committing murder and mayhem.
This is 22 Hours, An American Nightmare. What are your first impressions?
It's so weird because I've seen that house in... Wait, should we record this? Oh. It's so weird because I've seen that house in a million news photos, you know, on our site, everywhere. And so to see this exact corner, but nothing there now, is so eerie. It looks sad. The hedges here on that corner are unkempt. You know, it has quickly become this abandoned spot, you know.
Yeah.
In the site of once something, you know, so opulent, so beautiful.
Now it's just an empty lot. The Savopoulos home, which was once valued at about $4.5 million, was sold to a real estate company at a loss a few months after the killings. The house was sold as is. The windows, knocked out by firefighters, were boarded up, and there was still crime scene tape sealing the front doors when it went up for sale. And then, in April 2017, it was torn down.
You know, in a weird way, it looks kind of small. You know, just because it's so empty, there's nothing there, it looks vulnerable.
The voice you hear is my colleague, Jack Moore. He also covered Darren Wint's trial, and he's working on this podcast with me. He's a digital reporter at WTOP and prefers to be behind the scenes. The driveway's fenced off now, and there's a big chain on it, so no one can get in. I wonder how many people have come by to see it, you know? To see the space, to see where this happened. That banging is coming from a crew working on a neighbor's roof. Before heading to the neighborhood, we looked up some information about the history of the Savopoulos' house through online record searches and newspaper archives. And we found an old story from when the house was being built back in the 1920s.
Yeah, so there's actually a photo right here.
So what is that?
So this is the residence for Representative Martin H. Madden of Illinois. And this is an article from the Washington Evening Star, November 18th, 1922. It says, the residence for Representative Martin H. Madden of Illinois, nearing completion at the northwest corner of 32nd Street and Woodland Drive in Massachusetts Park. Apparently that's what they used to call this area.
Huh.
Representative Madden Oh, no, this is interesting. Representative Madden is at the head of one of the largest construction concerns in the country. So he was a construction guy, too. The dwelling is of brick construction with stone trim. It contains 6 bedrooms and 3 baths with a built-in garage, which, in 1922, that was probably, that was
a really
new.
big deal, yeah.
The architecture is Georgian. The home is located on one of the highest points in the park.
The neighborhood where the Savopoulos house stood was literally carved out of the woods about 100 years ago. A group of real estate developers got together and decided to turn what was about 200 acres of forested hills around the Naval Observatory, now the spot where the vice president lives, into a, quote, little city of fashionable residences. It was the largest real estate project in the city up to that point. It took 5 years and $2 million. The engineers were under strict orders to parcel up the lots and plan the streets without changing or destroying the natural features of the land. The result being that today, the Washington Post reported in 1917, quote, the property offers a wonderfully beautiful and natural setting as a site for handsome homes. I'm sort of looking for any sign that this happened, but it's been so long now. I mean, I was here the day they actually were tearing it down. Obviously, it took a few days because the house was so big. I remember seeing the bulldozer raking over this giant pile of rubble, more than 10 feet high, full of bricks and snapped boards. Half of the house was still standing. The other half was this sort of torn open, jagged brick facade, kind of like looking into a massive dollhouse. This is part of my report from April 2017. Neighbors in the upscale area say they're ready to see the home that represents such tragedy demolished.
Just a sad situation. No one was going to move into that house, and so they sold a lot, and it's a demolition site now.
The company Four Quartets Trust bought the home and lot for $3 million last November. The demolition crew says it will be totally torn down by noon Monday. Back at the same spot, standing with Jack, facing where the front door used to be, there are a few brick steps leading up from the sidewalk level. That's where the flagstone pathway starts. But before you can take a step, it's blocked by an 8-foot-tall fence. This is sort of eerie, isn't it? It's like the steps to nowhere. It's like the steps up and then there's a flagstone pathway.
At the point in time, what extended up to the house, the front porch.
But now there's nothing there. Grass has started to grow sparsely over the dirt pile where the house once stood. When Jack and I went to Woodland Drive, we couldn't help but notice, even for a cold January day, the neighborhood seemed alive with activity. There were landscapers working in the yards. There were those roofers you heard in the background. As we stood on the sidewalk, every once in a while a car would pass us, slowly climbing the hill. We must have looked out of place because everyone seemed to be scoping us out. But it's just so eerie to think about. Were they, tied up in that room, not knowing what their future held, even in the next hour, And who were they hearing outside? Who was just right nearby,
right,
who had no idea what was going on, obviously.
Right, all of this normal activity is going on just right outside the window.
That day of the fire, the day firefighters went rushing into the Savopoulos house and made their gruesome discovery, was May 14th. In this episode, we're going to take you back to May 13th, the day before the fire, when the Savopoulos family's nightmare began. Over those 22 hours they were held, the Savopoulos' beautiful house, this dream home on a hill, became their prison, and then a graveyard. Okay, Jack, let's talk about how we put this timeline together. Because it's not, I just want people to know, it's not our take on what happened. It's not guessing. This is all from court testimony, from sitting there in the courtroom for those 6 weeks.
All 6 weeks, 70 witnesses, and some other kinds of evidence like cell phone records, because we know who was calling who at what time. So we have a timestamp for a lot of this stuff, exact timestamp, because we have the phone records. We have text messages. We have voicemails that people left.
Mm-hmm. And then there are some things that, for some reason, a witness remembered why they were at that point at a specific time just because of the day they had.
Right. And that also helps fill out the timeline. And other things like the security logs from the Savopoulos family security system, which they did have a security system.
And it was tricky because it's not like the testimony was presented at like 1 o'clock this happened, 2 o'clock this happened, 3. I mean, it wasn't chronological at all.
No, I mean, you'd have witnesses testifying about one particular element of the case. Maybe it would be forensic investigators, and then a witness coming in talking about, what she saw on Wednesday, May 13th. So it was difficult to keep track of everything. I mean, we had to create this massive Google Doc of all of the testimony, collating together these weeks of testimony, putting it in order. It was challenging.
We wanted you to hear this just like we did in the witness's own words. But cameras and audio recordings are not allowed inside D.C. Superior Court. And after a trial, the court releases only written transcripts, not audio recordings. In fact, we didn't even know there were audio recordings of this trial or any trial in D.C. Superior Court. The written transcript, produced by the court reporter, is considered the official record of the trial. It was as we were putting together this podcast a few months after the trial that we heard there might be audio recordings. A court employee confirmed that the recordings did exist, but that they were considered a backup, and that the court, in its entire history, had never released audio recordings before. That they aren't subject to a Freedom of Information Act request because they're secondary recordings. The written transcript is the official record of a court proceeding, and that's that. So we decided to write the chief judge of the D.C. Superior Court, Robert Morin. We explained the podcast we were working on, how the audio recordings would help us tell the story of this complex, lengthy trial, and that we believed more public access to court proceedings is a good thing. We figured we'd get back a polite letter telling us no. But we got a different kind of letter. Can't open it. Oh my God.
Chief Judge Morin asked that I write in response to your letter dated March 8th, 2019, in which you requested copies of recordings from the case United States versus Darren Wint.
A court official wrote us back to tell us that after the chief judge received our letter, he ordered a review of the Superior Court's policies for potentially releasing audio recordings of the trial. They weren't making any promises, and we may not get the recordings in time for this podcast, but there's a chance that in the future, audio recordings of trials in D.C. Superior Court could become public for the first time ever. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with HelloFresh. You may have heard of HelloFresh. They send chef-crafted recipes and fresh ingredients to your home. But this summer, they upgraded their menu big time, letting you pick healthy and comfort options, but you can also choose meals that are tailored around allergies and others that kids have taste tested. How do I get to do that? With the menu now double the size, you can choose from 100 options each week, and they now come in bigger portions, so everyone is satisfied. The meal options look tasty, and I'm sure I'm not alone being tired of making the same 5 or 6 meals for my family every week. HelloFresh lets us try something new and add some spice to our routines. The best way to cook just got better. Go to HelloFresh.com/nightmares10FM now to get 10 free meals. Get it? 10FM? Plus, they'll add 1 free item for life. 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied at discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's HelloFresh.com/nightmares10FM to get 10 free meals and a free item for life. By all accounts, Wednesday, May 13th, 2015, began like any other day in the Savopoulos house. Normal, but busy. Sava, the CEO of American Ironworks, who always seemed to have several irons in the fire, was gearing up for another big project, a passion project. Over the years, he'd become immersed in the world of Japanese martial arts. He discovered a style of swordsmanship called kenjutsu when he was a teen, and it stuck with him his whole life. He acquired a collection of samurai swords and eventually became a headmaster. And Sava dreamed of opening his own studio, a dojo where he could continue teaching and sharing his passion. By May 2015, he'd turned that dream into a reality. The dojo was set to open in Chantilly, Virginia, in the suburbs of D.C., the same week of the murders. Things were running a little behind schedule, and it was a race to get the studio ready for the grand opening. Still, with all this hustle and bustle going on, family came first. Shortly before 7 that morning, Sava is texting with his daughter, Katerina. Katerina was the middle child, the younger of the 2 girls. She was a junior in high school at her boarding school, called Petty, in New Jersey. Sava and Katerina were particularly close. They were both night owls, and sometimes when she couldn't sleep, Katerina would call her dad in the middle of the night just to talk. The morning of May 13th, she had something on her mind. Katerina texted her dad about prom. It was coming up, and she had decided to ask a guy to the dance because gender roles are stupid, she wrote in her text. 2 minutes later, at 6:59 a.m., Sava texted back, "Good job. Remember to hold the door for him since gender roles are stupid. Really glad you're going. Have fun." The text exchanges are sweet, a little sassy, and completely normal in a haunting way. They show Sava is a typical dad with typical dad jokes and close with his children. There's nothing dire or unusual about the text, nothing to indicate that just in a few hours, something terrible is about to happen. Katerina would text her dad a few more times, both that day and the next. But that text from him, the one about prom, would be the last time she heard from him. Meanwhile, Sava and Amy's youngest child, Philip, was staying home from school that morning to go to a doctor's appointment. The 10-year-old attended St. Albans School, a private, all-boys school on the grounds of the nearby National Cathedral. Philip had always loved cars, just like his dad, collected Hot Wheels. And now the fourth grader had discovered what he wanted to be when he grew up, a Formula One race car driver. Sava and Amy nurtured his newfound passion. A few months before, Sava had taken him for go-kart racing classes at a track in Maryland, a place called Audubon. His instructor was a man named Jordan Wallace. Jordan was in his late 20s, very friendly, very charming, super into cars, and he got along great with Philip. Jordan only coached Philip for a few months. Once Philip's passion for racing really took off, the family wound up hiring a well-known private racing coach for him. But Jordan stayed in the picture. He'd become friendly with Sava, who ended up offering Jordan a job as his personal assistant after Jordan lost his position at Audubon. You'll be hearing a lot more about Jordan Wallace later. On May 13th, Philip was recovering from a concussion he had suffered in a recent racing competition in Arizona. But he was on the mend. In fact, the doctor's appointment didn't even have to do with his concussion. It was an appointment with a dermatologist about having a scar on his face removed. So that morning, Amy drives Philip to his appointment at an office building about 20 minutes away from the house, just over the D.C. line into Maryland. We know they made it to the doctor's office because she and Philip were seen in a surveillance video walking into the office building where the doctor's office was located.
Look at this stuff.
The building is just a few blocks from our newsroom, so we went to see it in person. See, it's going to be like in the upper left-hand corner. Yeah.
But would they have come in from the front? Parked in the parking garage? Yeah.
This was the shot of them walking in right here. Philip's appointment was relatively quick. The dermatologist said so on the stand. But we also know that because a ticket stub for a nearby garage shows Amy parking her Range Rover at 9:09 a.m. and then leaving at about 10:45. Then it was back home to Woodland Drive. There was some question about whether Philip would return to school that day. At about 12:30, Amy's phone records show she gets a text message from Philip's teacher. It was getting late in the day, and he said it may not make sense for Philip to come in today. Amy never responded. On deadline to get the dojo up and running, Sava left that morning for Chantilly, Virginia, where he was meeting contractors to prepare for the grand opening. It was crunch time. A few days before, Amy reached out to Nellie Gutierrez, the family's other housekeeper, seeing if she could take on some extra work and help Sava and Chantilly. It was Mother's Day. Nellie was out to lunch with her son when Amy called her and left a message.
Hey Nellie, it's Amy. I am calling to see if I could get you and your crew, I think is the best bet. Maybe 2 days, Monday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, if you could. Sava built a martial arts studio in Chantilly, Virginia. And of course, Bill's during the construction, so we're down to the wire.
So on that Wednesday, May 13th, Nellie went out to the dojo with a crew ready to clean the place up. Vera was supposed to be with her. Vera usually worked at the Savopoulos house, but Nellie had asked her to go to Chantilly since she needed all the extra hands she could spare. And Amy didn't really want Vera to run the vacuum or make noise around the house since Philip was still recovering from his concussion. At first, Vera had agreed to go with Nellie out to the dojo. But then, at the last minute, she changed her mind. Nellie said she was surprised when Vera changed her mind about going to Chantilly. Because Vera had trouble communicating in English, she always preferred to work alongside Nellie. Nellie said that day, May 13th, was the first time in 16 years of working together that Vera told her no. Instead, Vera ended up going to the house on Woodland Drive.
I don't understand why she changed her mind on Wednesday in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I was worried about Vera. I said, let me call her and find out how was her day. Because she told me that Amy was so stressed because of the little boy getting sick and all that stuff. And I called her on Wednesday in the afternoon. No response.
Back at the Savopoulos house, the digital trail becomes a little fuzzy. The call records and text messages are silent. It's hard to say exactly what's happening and when it's happening, but there's nothing to indicate that it's still not a completely normal day. And here's something we are pretty sure about. At some point after coming back from Philip's appointment, sometime after 11:30 that morning, Amy leaves the house. And we know this because someone sees Amy walking by herself that afternoon. It's someone who knew Amy fairly well, and the day sticks out in her mind clearly.
It was a very odd day for me. I have a daughter, my oldest daughter, who's now a sophomore in college. At the time, was in high school, and she's a volleyball player.
This is Margaret Pressler, who you heard from in the last episode. The day was odd for her because her daughter was supposed to have surgery that morning for a knee injury she got playing volleyball. But the surgery was canceled at the very last second because the doctor wasn't feeling well. Margaret was in the car on her way to pick up her daughter from school later that afternoon when she saw Amy.
With a very clear line of sight, I pulled up sort of alongside her, and then I was stopped, and she walked ahead of me. She wouldn't have seen me because I was ever so slightly behind her when I came to a stop, and she walked on ahead of me, walking kind of slowly. Not all that surprising because I'm sure there aren't very many people who are getting ready to walk up that very long hill she was about to walk up to her house who don't sort of have this, here we go. and so she was, carrying a bag, and she looked nice. She was nicely dressed, and she just seemed like she was walking home at a kind of a leisurely pace. And so it was easy to see her.
The way Amy was dressed that day also sticks out in Margaret's mind because it was sort of unusual. Amy often wore athletic clothes. A few years before, she'd gotten really into fitness and walked everywhere. But when Margaret Pressler saw her, Amy was dressed nicely. Not too fancy, almost like she'd gone out for lunch. It looked like she was wearing a khaki skirt with a cardigan or a dark jacket slung over her shoulders. And Margaret remembers a large brown leather purse hanging off Amy's shoulder. So where was Amy coming from when Margaret Pressler saw her? Prosecutors believe Amy had left the house to run some errands. She was a self-proclaimed coffee addict. Maybe she was making a quick run to the Starbucks near where she was spotted, running out and leaving Philip with Vera before Vera had to leave for the day. Vera always left around 3 o'clock. Margaret Pressler testified during the trial, and her testimony was a key part of the timeline that prosecutors put together in laying out how and when the crime happened.
Still, to me, it's haunting to me to have seen that. I mean, she exists to me in that spot to this day. It's very, very clear in my head to see her. And it's funny that you think of all the things that you see in a day, all these moments where you see somebody in the store, see somebody you know, see somebody you don't know, just people you see, and it never stays in your brain. Like what's going to stick in your memory and what's not, and why is it going to stick there? Well, this stuck there for obvious reasons. I mean, there was on the one hand what was going on in my life that made it possible for me to pinpoint exactly when that happened because I knew what was going on in my life at that moment.
Margaret Pressler can even provide almost an exact timestamp of when she saw Amy, 3:25 p.m. Right before she saw Amy cross the street to trudge up that hill, Margaret had just gotten off the phone with a nurse who said her daughter's surgery was back on for the next morning.
And then at the same time, the next day, when I heard that this had happened to the Savopoulos family, the first thing I said to my husband when he called me was, "Oh my God, I saw Amy yesterday. I saw her." that was shocking to me. And it's still shocking to me, kind of, really. I mean, even though I've had a lot of time to process it, I still think about it a lot, and I feel enormously sad.
Because it's like, obviously nobody knew what was going to happen. But if it was her, and if the timeline is the way we think it is, you were probably the last person that she knew to see her alive.
Quite likely. It's nobody else has come forward to say that they saw her after I saw her. So that is chilling. I mean, and it's sad to me, especially just, I didn't just know her. Like, I've been in her house. I know what it was like, what the house looked like when she walked in the front door. It just is, I can sort of picture her walking up and walking in there. It's very sad. It's an unbelievable tragedy, and I feel strange to have sort of tangentially experienced that tragedy.
We don't know exactly what happened next. It's one of those mysteries about this case, still. But when Amy arrived back home and walked in, investigators believe the intruder, who would take Amy, her son, her husband, and Vera hostage, had already cut the phone lines to the house and slipped inside. Crime scene photos from the house help tell that part of the story. The photos, introduced as evidence, show the home's lavish foyer. There's a wooden staircase leading up to the home's second level. Intricate sage green chinoiserie wallpaper of birds line the walls. An antique wooden bureau stands in the hall ahead. On it sit two large decorative Chinese vases, some papers, and a laptop. Also on the bureau, there's a Starbucks cup. Resting on the chair next to it is a large brown leather bag, just like the one Margaret Pressler described seeing on Amy's shoulder, a Louis Vuitton. It looks as if Amy had walked inside and set her things down. But not everything is in its place. There's a child's school notebook and books strewn across the front hallway. It's clear this is no longer a normal day. Investigators believe this is the moment when Amy is taken hostage. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Quince. Fall is upon us, and I don't know about you, maybe it's the back-to-school fresh start that we used to have as kids, but I tend to update my wardrobe when the cooler temperatures hit, and Quince makes it easy to look polished and save big without compromising on quality. I already have a few of their signature 100% cashmere sweaters. Fancy, huh? A good gift, by the way, at $50, as well as their washable silk tops and skirts. But if you're looking for a nice wool coat or to update your denim for the fall, now's the time. And it won't break the bank. Quince does it by cutting out the middleman and partnering with ethical top-tier factories to deliver luxury quality at half the price of similar brands. Keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/nightmares for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/nightmares to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/nightmares. For now, we're going to use words like intruder or kidnapper instead of using Darren Wint's name. We want to try and recreate for you how investigators built the timeline of the family and Vera's last 22 hours when they were taken hostage, before investigators really knew who their suspect was. There's evidence that does place him in the house, but we'll account for what we know about Darren Wint's whereabouts over those 2 days in a later episode. Okay, back to the cut phone lines. When were they cut? We don't know exactly, but it was before Amy got home from her walk that afternoon. Around the same time Margaret Pressler saw Amy out walking, someone was trying to call the house. That call was from a pet hotel where the Savopoulos family would often board their 2 Chesapeake Bay retrievers, Ginger and Bear. It may sound silly to put it this way, but both dogs vacationed at the Old Town Pet Resort frequently. The Savopouloses were one of the pet resort's top clients. And they had reservations coming up for Memorial Day weekend, a little more than a week away. But Amy had not confirmed the booking or put down a deposit yet, so they were calling to make sure she still wanted them to hold a space. According to the company's records, a receptionist tried to call the house at 3:14, the afternoon the family was taken hostage, but she couldn't get through. She wrote in her logbook, quote, "Home phone disconnected." Now, a quick note about the dogs. They survived the fire unharmed, but there was always a bit of a mystery about how the intruder was able to make it past the dogs and into the house. These are pretty big dogs, and Ginger, the older of the two, was known to be aggressive, especially towards strangers. We don't know what happens next. That's one of the most frustrating and haunting aspects of this horrible crime. The long gaps in the timeline when it's just our terrible imagination left to fill in the blanks. We know what happens, eventually, but not how it plays out in real time. The only inkling we have of what's going on is from the call records. So here's what they tell us. It turns out the pet resort was very persistent. They really wanted to nail down this reservation, because an hour later, at about 4:20 p.m., they start trying Amy's cell phone. Still, she doesn't answer. Then at 4:38 p.m., according to the phone records, Amy makes a call of her own. She calls her husband, and when Sava picks up the phone, she asks him to come home. At this time of the day, Sava is in full-on, hands-on CEO mode. He's still out at the martial arts studio. Things are hectic. They're in the home stretch ahead of the grand opening. Construction crews are still working, cutting mats for the floor, installing plumbing fixtures, not as close to finishing the project as Sava would like. Remember Jordan Wallace, the golf cart coach? He's also there, working as Sava's driver. He was also Sava's assistant and all-around gopher. It was still a new job for him. Just 2 months before, Jordan had been fired from Audubon after he said he asked for a $1 an hour raise. When Jordan texted Sava to let him know he'd been let go and could no longer coach Philip, Sava said he might have a position for Jordan as a driver. The next day, Sava ended up hiring Jordan at exactly what he was asking for at Audubon, plus a 401k and benefits. Jordan's position was a mix of the personal and professional. His duties included driving Sava to job sites, running errands, and running Sava's eBay account, through which his boss had successfully sold a camera, and a Bentley. So on that Wednesday, when Sava and his team were up at the dojo, Jordan also spent the day there at Sava's side, doing whatever needed to be done. It was Nellie, though, who happened to be working near Sava when he took the call from Amy. Again, that call was at 4:38 p.m. As Nellie recalls, Amy was trying to get Sava to come home, but he was reluctant. There was still so much work to get done, and he didn't really want to leave early. At first, she says he starts cracking jokes, telling his wife,
"No, we have a lot to do in here because first of all, Nellie came late, and plus she's very lazy, and I look him like that, yeah." I say, "Are you kidding me? Why you say that?"
But he was just teasing you.
Yeah, so that's why I find out that was Amy.
Finally, Sava relents. He calls Nellie over and tells her he has to leave. Amy's made plans to go out with her friends, and she needs Sava to come home and stay with Philip. Before he leaves, Sava pulls Nellie aside and puts her in charge of locking up the dojo before she leaves for the night. Even then, Nellie says she and some of the crew found Amy's phone call a little odd. After Sava left, they were sort of gossiping a little. Why was Amy calling him away from the dojo when she knew the grand opening was Friday, just 2 days away?
This is a businessman. Why he has to go and stay with Philip? And it was strange for me. But at the same time, I said, well, when you work with this type of family like Amy and Sava, they were like very busy.
It just seemed to be another day where plans were changing at the last minute. Nellie says she still remembers watching Sava walking out of the dojo that evening. She can't get that image out of her head. It's the last time she ever saw him. The call that Amy made to Sava was a call investigators say she was forced to make. She was luring him home, and she had to sell it, because it didn't really make sense for him to leave. But she was following her kidnapper's orders. There would be other calls once Sava gets home. Several calls. And some text messages, too. All of them, investigators say, at the direction of the intruder. And none of the people they were calling while they were being held captive, nobody, had any idea what was going on inside that house. Some of the calls really don't seem to make any sense. For example, just a few minutes after Amy got off the phone with Sava, she calls the pet resort back. Why? Maybe the person holding them hostage was nervous about all those missed calls from that number going unreturned. Maybe he was worried about someone coming to the house to check on her if Amy didn't answer. We just don't know. But she made the call. The receptionist she spoke with at the pet resort testified to that at trial. She says Amy didn't sound like herself. Normally, Amy was bubbly and chatty, adding on extra services for the dogs and paying to have them picked up in the company's pet limo. The receptionist said Amy sounded off, like she was sleepy. No extras for the dogs this time, just the basics, and charges to the credit card on file. And then she gets off the phone. That's it. No screams in the background, no cry for help. You have to ask yourself, how was Amy able to hold it together on this call? And during all the calls that would follow, never letting on what was happening. Prosecutors say the answer to that is simple. Amy, and later Sava, would do whatever it took to protect their little boy. It wasn't worth the risk. Shortly before 6 o'clock, about an hour and a half after Amy talks to Sava on the phone, asking him to come home, the house's alarm system sends out 3 quick alerts. The security system recorded the sound of breaking glass at 5:56, 5:57, and 5:59 that evening. Now, there's something to know about the security system. The Savopoulos house had a security system from a company called Security Engineering Incorporated, but it wasn't fully activated. Those notifications about the glass breaks were being logged on the security company's computers in suburban Maryland, but those alerts were not being monitored. Nobody was calling to check on the family. And the glass break detector isn't normally something that would even rise to that level anyway. We learned during the trial that anything would set them off. Dropping keys on a kitchen counter, the dog's collar jangling, all those sounds could cause a glass break alert. So what was the alarm system warning about that evening? We don't know. The security system was still pretty new. It had only been installed for a few months, and the family was basically still trying it out. For example, the system was also set to send out an alarm when the outside doors were opened, but only if the system was activated. It's called arming the system. On some days, the family wasn't arming the system at all. May 13th was one of those days. About a half hour after the glass break alerts, at 6:25 p.m., Sava is still on his way home from the dojo. He's almost there. We know this because an FBI expert was able to retrace Sava's route that evening. He did it by analyzing the location of Sava's cell phone based on the nearest cell tower it was communicating with, or pinging off of. This method only works if the phone is being used to make or receive calls or messages, so it's not foolproof. But the FBI expert's analysis shows just before 6:30, Sava's phone is pinging off a tower near Woodland Drive. We don't know what happened when Sava walked in the door. But there are clues. When investigators took a swab of the kitchen door in the back of the house, they found traces of his blood. They think that he was attacked there, caught off guard right as he was walking in the door. And in the crime scene photos, in the front hallway, just off the kitchen, there's his red briefcase. It's toppled over. There's a ring of keys dropped on the floor. It's at this point investigators believe Sava is taken hostage, hours after his wife, his son, and Vera were overpowered. In the end, we know the adults were all together. Amy, Sava, and Vera in Abigail's bedroom upstairs, and Philip in the adjoining one, Katerina's room. Vera and Amy were bound at their hands and ankles with duct tape. Crime investigators found gray tape residue stuck to the bottom of the chair legs. Sava's wrists were restrained with zip ties. All of the adults had bruising and cuts on their wrists where they'd struggled against their restraints. We know this is where they were found, but we don't know how they got there. We can only imagine the horror, the mental torture, the fear, the adrenaline they felt over those 19, 20, 22 hours they were held. The waiting. Each minute feeling like an hour. Each hour like a day. And throughout the entire ordeal, as far as we can tell, they give in to his every demand. How was the intruder able to maintain control over 4 victims, 3 who are adults, for so long in their own house? Again, prosecutors would later say it goes back to Philip. They would do whatever he wanted to protect their little boy. Whatever he wanted. And now, based on the call records, it becomes clear. He wants money. Shortly before 8 o'clock that night, Sava calls his sister. Deborah Masser worked for the family business. She was the controller of American Iron Works. She actually lived in Florida and worked remotely. As the company's controller, Deborah handled the money. When Sava gets her on the phone that night, he says he needs to withdraw anywhere between $35,000 and $50,000. That's a lot of money. And he needs it immediately. One would think that would raise concerns. But Debbie says it wasn't entirely unusual. Sava would frequently attend auctions on the hunt for specialized equipment, very expensive equipment, often running into the several thousands of dollars. Sava's sister thought that's what he was doing when he called that Wednesday night. That was about the amount of money he'd need if he was headed to one of those big auctions. She suggested doing the withdrawal as a cashier's check, but he was adamant it had to be cash. That was unusual. But there were no other signs anything else was out of the ordinary. Debbie Masser would end up testifying during the trial, and when she was asked, how did Sava sound? Like Sava, she said, perfectly normal. Still, she couldn't get him the money that night. It was 8 o'clock. All the banks were closed. He'd have to wait until the next morning. The sun set at 8:12 p.m. on Wednesday, May 13th, 2015. It would be a long night, and there were still calls to make. Desperate to get his family out of this alive, Sava takes the next steps in arranging what came to be known as the money drop. He needs someone to bring the money to him. Someone who would do what he was asked, without asking a lot of questions. Jordan. At 8:27 p.m., Sava makes a call to Jordan Wallace, his assistant.
Slight change of plans tomorrow. I've got a package that I'm going to need you to bring down to me, and probably won't be ready to leave the office until like 10 o'clock or so. But if you could just go in there and check on things like those eBay listings, et cetera, I'm sure we got plenty to do. And then I'll just be in touch with you when with some more details. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
A few things about that voicemail. It sounds like nothing's wrong. Sava starts off almost joking around. Apparently, Jordan's voicemail greeting still referenced his old job at Audubon. And throughout the message, Sava sounds upbeat and breezy. Just a slight change of plans, Sava says. Go to the American Iron Works office in Maryland, check on a few of those eBay listings, and wait for further instructions. Just a few minutes later, at 8:30 p.m., Jordan texts back. Got your message. We'll wait for package. During the trial, the lead prosecutor, Laura Bach, asked Jordan, when Sava left you that voicemail that night, did you think something weird was happening? Jordan replied, no, ma'am. And ask yourself this, if you heard that voicemail, would you think anything was amiss? The next call leads to one of the most bizarre elements of the crime, the pizza. At 9:14 p.m. that night, about 45 minutes after Sava leaves that voicemail for Jordan Wallace, Amy makes a phone call to Domino's Pizza.
Thank you for choosing Domino's on Wisconsin Avenue in Tenleytown. Presione 2 para español.
She calls the Domino's in Tenleytown, about a 10-minute ride from Woodland Drive, near the campus of American University. The assistant manager answers the phone. The order was for 2 pizzas, 1 cheese, 1 pepperoni, and a bottle of soda. Amy paid over the phone with a credit card, with a $5 tip for the driver added ahead of time to the total. Oh, and she had a bit of a strange request. She told the manager she was tending to her son who wasn't feeling well, so the driver should just leave the pizza on the front porch. Don't ring the doorbell. The pizza is crucial in this case. We've already hinted at why, and we'll explain in more detail as we go through the forensic evidence. But why did the intruder order a pizza? Who orders a pizza during a home invasion? Even the lead prosecutor, Laura Bach, was at a loss. During her closing arguments, she told the jury, not everything can be explained. Trying to figure out why he ordered the pizza is one of those rabbit holes you can just get lost in. They're all over this case. She said if the jury got hung up trying to figure out the pizza, why did he order 2 pizzas? Why would he take the risk of being seen picking it up? Bach said to figure that out, they'd be in the deliberation room for the next 3 years. Maybe the intruder was trying to reassure the family. Maybe he was trying to make it look like there was normal activity at the house. Maybe he was just hungry. We don't know, Laura Bach told the jury. You're not going to know. There's one call that Sava made that night. You've heard part of it before. It's a call to Nellie Gutierrez, the family's longtime employee and Vera's friend.
Hey, Nellie, it's Sava. I hope you get this message. Amy is in bed sick tonight, and she was sick this afternoon. And Vera offered to stay and help her out because, we're going through some stuff with Philip. So she's going to stay the night here. But Vera's phone died, and she doesn't have her charger, and I don't have a charger that fits her phone. So I don't know if you can tell anybody that would be worried about her that she's just going to be here with us tonight. Okay? Thank you. Oh, and would you send me a text when you get the message just so I can make sure? Thanks, Nellie. Good night.
That call was placed at 9:35 p.m., about 20 minutes after the pizza order. Now, here's the thing. Vera had worked at the family's home every day, Monday through Friday, for 4 years, and she had never once stayed overnight. And the explanation is kind of convoluted. She didn't have a charger. Why couldn't Vera have used Sava's phone to call Nellie or to call her husband? And the story Sava gave that Amy was sick, that's not what he told Nellie just a few hours before. Remember, the reason he had to leave the dojo early in the first place was because Amy had plans to go out that evening. All of those details stuck out to Nellie when she heard the voicemail. They made her suspicious, made her feel like something wasn't right. It was the first call made out of 3201 Woodland that raised any suspicions. Even though the sound of Sava's voicemail seems casual, Nellie knew better. It didn't add up. But there's a problem. She didn't hear that voicemail until the next morning. Now, back to the pizza for a moment. We know the order came in at 9:14 p.m., but we don't know the exact time the pizza was delivered. The driver who dropped it off also testified during the trial. He said when he got there, it looked like all the lights inside the house were off. The only light he could see was the front porch light. The driver said he left the pizza on the porch, didn't knock or ring the doorbell like he was told. Now, while we don't know exactly what time the pizza was delivered, we think we know what happened next. The intruder makes his way downstairs, then out to the front porch to grab the pizza, and he notices, for the first time, the security camera perched up in a corner above the front door. And when that front door opens, the motion triggers the camera to click on. It begins recording. On the next episode of 22 Hours, An American Nightmare, questions about what a key eyewitness saw.
I mean, listen, the defense has to do that, right? They have to find anything they can to, I'm sure they were thrilled when they found that piece of video of her going in the morning, but it doesn't change what I saw.
Thanks for listening to Episode 2, Taken Captive. A lot has happened to the Savopoulos' family house since the fire in May of 2015. As we mentioned in the episode, it was once valued at $4.5 million. Just a few months after the murders, the home was listed for $3.2 million by Washington Fine Properties, LLC. Described as a 5-bedroom, 7-bathroom house sitting on 0.3 of an acre corner lot, it sold in November of 2015 for $3 million. After the demolition 2 years later, we thought construction would begin on a new house, but the land sat empty for another 4 years. In August 2021, the lot sold for $2.6 million. The buyer remained anonymous, purchasing the property under an LLC that was named after the original address. Now, 10 years later, there's a brand new home on the land, a glass mansion that's now for sale, listed in May of 2025 for $6.5 million. The 6,400 square foot home with 6 bedrooms and 5.5 baths has a saltwater pool, high-end appliances, and a 6-foot, 2-sided lava rock fireplace. Okay, so I'm pulling up. Oop, just hit a red light. About, a couple blocks away. It's so funny because I've been to this house so many times before, but I always get turned around in this part of DC. But they are having an open house today. And I'm going to go. The owner, Alon Street, said that I could attend the open house because journalistically it's a little bit finicky. I mean, it is private property, but it's an open house. So, technically I could go in as a member of the public, but I don't want to misrepresent myself. So I called and made sure they were cool with me coming in to see it. And I'm interested to see how I feel in the house. I know that might sound a little woo-woo, but I just wonder how it feels in there. As I pulled onto 32nd Street, I passed the garage of the new house on the right, in roughly the same spot as the Savopoulos' garage. I found a shady spot to park. You can hear the bells of the Washington National Cathedral behind me. There's a pool in the front. Can't really tell which one's the door because they're all huge windows. Hello? Hey, Eric, Megan Cloherty. Hi. I'm good. Realtor Eric Chavez was kind enough to show me around.
Well, I'll give you a tour of the home like as if you were a buyer, so you can understand like some of the stuff that he's done.
Thank you.
That he wouldn't do were it a spec house, right? So.
Did he ever live here?
No.
So no one's ever lived here?
No one's ever lived here.
Huh. Eric introduced me to the man who anonymously bought the land and built this home. He is Alon Street, a developer who seized the opportunity to buy the lot in the Tony neighborhood of Northwest D.C. that would have cost millions more if not for the crime that took place there before he purchased it. It took him years to clear the land, re-site it, and build. I met him at his home less than a mile from the new house to learn about that decision. There are some people who would say, how could you ever live on land where something like that happened?
The house I live on now, something horrible happened on. We live in the part of America where for 300 plus years, there have been wars, there have been blood spills. Why do I get to pick and choose? Some people pick and choose. I don't. It didn't matter to me.
It didn't matter. Because I think, I mean, obviously, I take your point that a lot has happened here.
Everyone has a different view.
Specifically, 10 years ago, that's what happened there. You know, like, this is a very specific circumstance.
Sure, and it's a horrific crime. But it was, from what I understand, he didn't pick the property or the house or the lot. He picked the individual. That's what happened.
Alon told me that his wife wanted a more traditional house. So he bet her that if she could find something in the neighborhood they wanted before he built the house, they'd live there. It's kind of sad a little bit that you built your dream house.
Sure, but it was my dream house. It wasn't our dream house, right? Like my wife didn't want a modern house.
I asked him about the change of address, which he says took place before he purchased the land. And for his purposes, he says, the crime had nothing to do with why he kept the address on 32nd Street. DC code, if you're on a corner,
right,
you can choose.
You could choose where the front door will be, even if it's not officially a front door. So what the address is, right?
Because your house, it's the mudroom.
Well, it's the garage facing side is the front door, and thus the address. The reason I did that is because the way DC code works, you have setbacks. The way I commissioned a sun study. I want young family, pool, outdoors, sun. Set the house back, so you get that. Okay. That meant, because of setback requirements, I had to make 32nd the front door.
We don't know whether the previous owner of the land changed the address to disassociate from the crime, but legally, in some states, realtors have to divulge to potential buyers if someone has died in the home. I asked Eric about this in the open house, and we were interrupted, so he left me this voicemail later to clarify 47-2853 of the District of Columbia Code.
Hey, Megan, it's Eric Chavez. It was nice to meet you today. Just to clarify our conversation today, the history of the property is not a material fact of the disclosure, but if someone asks us directly about it, we don't hide that from them. So I hope that makes sense. So a disclosure statement that a seller fills out basically talks about all the material facts about a property regarding foundation, roofing, and HVAC systems, setback, easement, things like that, not crime and or other history. However, if someone asks us specifically, we have to treat everyone with honesty. So to clarify, anyone who has asked about that, we certainly haven't denied it. Hope that helps.
As for my curiosity about what it would feel like to set foot on the land, here's me leaving the house moments after the tour ended. Okay, so that was sort of timed perfectly, because as soon as I was wrapping up, there was somebody coming in. I didn't get
any kind of heaviness feeling from the house, which, I don't know, there's some people who subscribe to spirits and ghosts and all those things, and I sort of tend to feel it in my body, like heavy or light. And it didn't really felt like you were walking through a brand new, perfectly clean, nothing out of place home.
The home and the address may be brand new, but even if you search for 2800 32nd Street Northwest, at least at the time I'm recording this, the photo that comes up on Google is not of a new modern home. It's the empty parcel of land taken from the bottom of the Savopoulos' driveway in November 2021. The state of the property, surrounded by a warping chain-link fence and bordered by weeds, is long gone. But the memory of what was here isn't far. It's just an internet search away. This podcast was originally written and produced by Jack Moore and me, Megan Cloherty, with Julia Ziegler as our content advisor. I produce the new content for 22 Hours A Second Look. Thanks for listening. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Reviews, of course, are a big help in getting more people to discover this show. And to learn more about the case, visit AmericanNightmaresPodcast.com. That's also where you can search our entire catalog of episodes, find links to our social media accounts, and contact us. Music for this episode is Haters Hate by Ramon Messam. Call Me and Rhythmic Pulse by Daniel Birch, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 International. 22 Hours A Second Look is a production of the Gamut Podcast Network.